Hey everyone, today we're going to do something a little different. We're not just going to talk about what to think, we're going to talk about how to think. We're actually going to build a mental toolkit you can use to test the very foundations of what you believe to be true.
And look, the stakes here are really, really high. Just think about your worldview like a map for your life. If that map is accurate, it's going to guide you toward truth, toward a meaningful life. But what if it's flawed? What if the map doesn't match the territory at all? Well, that's how you end up driving right off a cliff. So let me just ask you, have you ever actually stopped to check your map?
So here's our game plan. We're going to start with what a worldview even is and why it's so important to test it. Then we'll get into our three main tests. Does it make sense internally? Does it match the real world? And can you actually live it out? Let's get into it.
Okay, first up, let's talk about that map you're using. Because here's the thing, we all have one, every single one of us, and a lot of the time we don't even realize it's there. It's just our untested worldview, kind of like the default settings for our entire life. So what do we mean by worldview? Well, you can think of it as the lens you look through to make sense of everything around you. It's this fundamental set of assumptions you have about reality that shapes, well, everything. Every thought, every value, every single decision you make. It's the foundation for how you see the world.
And check this out. Your worldview is already answering all the big questions for you, whether you know it or not. Questions like, where did this all come from? Who am I? Is there any point to all of this? How am I supposed to live? Every belief system out there, religious or not, offers a set of answers to these exact questions.
But there's a huge problem in our culture today. Most of us don't really have a thought-out, consistent worldview. What we have is more of a smorgasbord worldview, right? We pick a little bit of this idea that sounds nice, a little bit of that one, maybe some karma from over here, and a little pop psychology from over there. And we never ever stop to ask if any of these pieces actually fit together.
And that really brings us to the whole point of our session today. There's this great saying, the unexamined worldview is not worth believing. So our goal here is to give you the tools to go from a worldview you just kind of picked up along the way to one you have deliberately chosen through some real thought and analysis.
So why is testing your beliefs so important? Well, this next part reframes that whole idea. See, this isn't about promoting doubt for doubt's sake. It's about fulfilling a duty we all have to seek out what's true.
And what's really interesting is that this call for critical thinking isn't new. It's found in a lot of traditions. For instance, in the Bible, there's a direct command in 1 Thessalonians that says, test everything, hold on to the good. This suggests that really examining your beliefs isn't a sign of weak faith. It's actually an act of intellectual and spiritual integrity.
Okay, time to open up our toolkit. The very first tool we're going to use is for an internal check. It's the test of coherence. We're basically acting like structural engineers, looking for any major cracks in the foundation of a belief system.
So the test of logical coherence is actually pretty simple, but it's incredibly powerful. All it says is that a worldview cannot contradict itself. Its main claims have to hang together logically. It has to play by the basic rules of logic, like the law of non-contradiction, which is just a fancy way of saying something can't be both true and false at the same time and in the same way. You can't have it both ways.
Let me give you a perfect example of a popular idea that fails this test right away: relativism. Someone says there is no absolute truth. Well, think about that statement. Is that statement itself supposed to be an absolute truth? Because if it is, it refutes itself. The whole idea collapses under its own weight. It's just logically incoherent.
Now, this is really important. We have to know the difference between a contradiction and a paradox. A contradiction is illogical, like saying 1 equals 3. That's just nonsense. A paradox, on the other hand, is something that seems contradictory, but it might just point to a truth that's deeper than we can fully grasp. For instance, in Christian theology, the Trinity isn't a contradiction. It's a paradox. 3 distinct persons who share one single divine essence. It might be beyond our ability to fully comprehend, but it doesn't actually break the laws of logic.
All right, so once a worldview passes that internal check for logical consistency, we move on to the external check. This is where we take the map and we lay it over the territory of the real world to see if it actually lines up.
And that brings us to our second tool, the test of explanatory power. A worldview can't just make sense in your head. It has to explain the world as we actually experience it. Everything from the Big Bang and the laws of physics to the complexities of human nature. Bottom line, does it match reality?
So let's compare two different worldviews. Take naturalism, the idea that only the physical, material world exists.
It does an amazing job of explaining the seen universe, right? The stuff we can measure and observe, but it really struggles to account for the unseen realities that we all know exist, like objective good and evil, or the laws of logic, or even our own consciousness. Where did those come from? On the other hand, a theistic worldview like Christianity offers an explanation for both, a physical universe created by a rational mind, and those unseen realities, like morality and logic, being grounded in the very nature of that mind.
And that brings us to our third and final test, and this one is the most practical of all. Let's call it the stress test. Can you actually take this worldview and live it out day to day in the real world?
The test of livability asks a really simple question. Can you live it? See, a worldview isn't just some abstract idea. It has to be something you can live by, consistently. And more than that, it has to speak to those deep human needs we all have, for meaning, for hope, for purpose, for love.
Think about a worldview like hard determinism. A determinist believes that free will is an illusion and everything is predetermined. But then what does he do? He looks both ways before he crosses the street, acting as if his choice matters. And how does he react? He gets genuinely angry if someone punches him, acting as if that person was responsible for their choice. There's a total disconnect between what he claims to believe and how he's forced to live in the real world.
Now, by contrast, proponents of the Christian worldview would argue that it's intensely practical and livable. They would point to the real, observable changes it produces in people's lives and character. And they'd also argue that, historically, it's been a powerful force for good in shaping many of the positive aspects of society, from education to science to our legal system.
Okay, we've run our diagnostics, the evidence is in, let's pull everything together and see what the verdict is.
Now, it is so important to get this next point. We are not looking for 100% mathematical certainty here. That's just not possible when you're talking about things like history or philosophy. What we're doing is building a cumulative case. It's like being a detective. We're weighing all the different pieces of evidence together to find the best explanation, the one that makes the most sense of all the facts.
So, when we run the Christian worldview through this three-part test, what do we find? Well, according to its advocates, it passes with flying colors. It's internally coherent and doesn't contradict itself. It has massive explanatory power, making sense of both the seen and unseen aspects of reality. And finally, it's existentially livable and deeply satisfying.
So here's the big takeaway. Any worldview that is actually true shouldn't be afraid of tough questions. In fact, it should welcome them. Today, we've given you a toolkit, a framework for evaluating truth claims. The only question left is, what are you going to do with it? Which truth claims, which of your own core beliefs are you now going to put to the test?